So with the presidential inauguration coming up next week, I thought it might be helpful to have a list of books about voting and elections, if that's something that you wanted to discuss with your students. So I'm going to head to the library, grab some books about voting and elections, and I will meet you back here and we can chat all about it. Okay, I'm back. I grabbed my books, and here's a quick tip for you. Check to see if your library does curbside pickup. It's so easy. All I do is I go online, I request the books that I want. When they're ready, I head to the library, park in the parking lot, and give them a phone call, and they bring them right out to me, and I don't need to go inside at all. It's awesome. So I highly recommend seeing if your library has that available. But for now, let's go check out those books. I have 6 books that I think would be great for you to share with your students, all about the presidential election and voting and how that all works in our country. Each one of these books does a great job of breaking down this kind of difficult concept for students and making it something that they can connect to and makes it relatable for them. So the first book I have is If I Were President, and in this story it talks about how these 6 kids imagine what it would be like if they were president of the United States. So they think about how hard they would have to work to become president, and then the things that they would do once they were in that role. They would work with Congress to make laws. They would help out people who had been affected by a disaster. They wouldn't have to leave their house if they wanted to see a movie because there's a movie theater right in the White House. They would be protected by the Secret Service, and these students really imagine what it would be like to become president. And there's some great information in this book about the different things that the president does while in office. And it puts it in words that students will understand. But there's some great terms and vocabulary in here that you can talk about with your student. And I love how it ends with, you never know, I might just be president someday. The next one I have is Grace for President. And in this one, Grace is shocked to learn that there has never been a female president before. And she's out to change that. So her school is hosting an election, and Grace decides that she wants to run. She works really hard throughout the story, campaigning and earning her votes. At the very end, the whole school votes, and we find out who wins the election. Gonna give it away. But I like how this book explains the electoral process for students in a way that they would understand. The next one that I have is If I Ran for President, and this kind of reminds me of the first book I shared, the If I Were President book, except this one talks about what happens before you get into office. So all of the campaigning that needs to be done and how you earn votes from the people of the United States. And again, it takes some really great vocabulary and shares that with students in a way that they will understand. And kids will see that it takes a lot of hard work and determination to become president of the United States. The next book that I have is Vote. And I'm starting to realize I probably should have shared these in order, starting with how we vote and how to run for president all the way up to becoming president, but that's okay, we'll keep going. This book shares everything that students need to know about the voting process. It talks about how democracy works and why it's so important and how we can participate in it as we grow up. And again, this book has a lot of important vocabulary words that are broken down, making it easy for students to comprehend. So another great book when you're talking about elections and voting in your classroom. The next one is a fun one, and as teachers, you might get a kick out of this. This one is My Teacher for President. And in this story, a student thinks about the roles of the teacher and the roles of the president and how they have very similar jobs. And as he goes through the different things that each person does, that his teacher does, and that the president does, he sees those similarities and decides that his teacher just might have the right qualifications for running a country. One of the examples that the student gives is that his teacher likes to go on trips. So it shows a picture of the teacher taking the class on a field trip, and then it shows a picture of the president visiting different countries around the world. So the whole book is comparisons between the two and why the teacher would make such a great president. So this is a fun one to share with your class. But also gives that information about the different roles that the president has. And the last book is really just a fun one, but it has a little bit of information in it that your students can learn about elections and voting. And that one is Duck for President. And we all know how silly Duck is. So he decides that he wants to be in charge of the farm. So he decides to hold an election, and much to Farmer Brown's dismay, Duck wins the election. But then he decides running a farm is just way too much work. So he goes on to run for governor and president of the United States. So again, just a silly book, but does give some information about elections and the voting process. So those were 6 books that I think would be great to share with your class about voting and elections that I think will make it easier for them to understand the process. And to help you out, I have full interactive read-alouds to go along with each of these books. I'll leave the link to that in the description box down below, and I'll also leave links to every book that I shared in this video. I hope that your students love learning about the presidential election and the voting process with all of these books. If this was helpful for you, make sure you give this video a thumbs up and then hit the subscribe button below, because on Sunday night I will be back with my regular video upload. I'm going to be sharing some more books about presidents so that you'll have a whole list of books to read next week for when we have our presidential inauguration on January 20th. Have a great week.